about a family secret so strong, it affects people for years. The pain comes not only from the assault itself, but also from the silence that follows. What happens when the person who hurt you is someone you care about and trust, yet shielded by those closest to you? Picture a child growing up with uneasy glances and half-spoken warnings, never hearing the truth, but always feeling its weight, changing lives in ways few people talk about. Welcome to the Heritage of Hush podcast. I'm Wanda Williams-Bailey, your host. In today's episode, we are going to talk about sexual assault and explore how these experiences and patterns can turn into family secrets. We'll also look at how silence and trauma can be passed down through generations. Joining us is Dr. Victoria Shedrick, a licensed mental health professional and clinical consultant, specializing in trauma and family patterns. Before we begin, I want to warn, today's conversation may be emotionally difficult for some listeners. This episode discusses sexual assault, violence, trauma, and family silence. Listener discretion is advised. If this topic is difficult for you, please prioritize your well-being and listen when you feel ready.
I agree, Wanda. And as we continue to discuss these sensitive topics, I just want to say I really appreciate the care and sensitivity that you bring to these conversations. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Dr. V, for your kind words. Let's get started.
Okay.
When people think of family secrets, they often imagine hidden affairs, adoption, or financial issues. However, sexual assault and violence are rarely discussed and are often among the most deeply hidden family secrets.
Yeah, that's true. In many families, and even with trusted family friends, they may have been harm that has been caused. And the violence itself becomes hidden. And though people rarely talk about the abuse, there's still a shared sense that something happened quietly.
And quietly it is. Dr. V,
Mm-hmm.
as we discuss intergenerational family secret, some listeners may assume this only happens in certain communities or under specific circumstances. Are sexual assault and the secrecy surrounding it limited to any particular social, economic, racial, or cultural groups?
Absolutely not. Not at all. Sexual assault and the family secrets that often surround it can occur in any family, regardless of race, ethnicity, education level, religion, social economic status. No community is immune. What may differ, however, is how families respond to the trauma. But the violence itself, it crosses every demographic line. Unfortunately, when sexual assault occurs, especially when the perpetrator is, let's say, a grandfather, uncle, or trusted individual, families may choose silence over disclosure. The secret can be passed down through generations in the form of unspoken rules, fear, shame, mistrust. And while the details may remain hidden, the emotional impact still exists and affects children, grandchildren, and future generations.
Thank you, Dr. V, for your clear and concise explanation and for addressing the myths and misconceptions that can exist across all communities. Regarding family members born much later, can they still feel the effects?
Absolutely. Even if a child has never been told the details, they may sense something is wrong. And That could be through the way people act around them or the tension even in the air. And that sort of
Mm-hmm.
invisible weight can shape how families interact for generations.
Mm-hmm. I see. Dr. V, on that note, let's get specific.
Okay.
When the perpetrator is a family member,
Mm-hmm.
like an uncle, grandfather, or even an aunt, why does the family so often remain silent?
Mm.
Sexual abuse within families can happen to anyone, regardless of gender, yet abuse by female relatives, like aunts, is especially underreported.
Yes.
Why do families go to such lengths to protect the abuser? And what makes this silence so unbreakable?
Anna, that's a really good question. And it's important to note that this is much more common than people realize. Cultural pressure to preserve family reputation can deeply intensify the secrecy. And this
Mm-hmm.
secrecy often extends to cases involving female perpetrators, as you mentioned, as well as the male perpetrators. A family member may have harmed someone decades ago, yet the family will continue to invite them to holidays, barbecues, reunions, celebrations. And too
Mm-hmm.
often, the focus becomes more about maintaining appearances rather than acknowledging the harm. And it's
Yeah.
this kind of silence that can be deeply unsettling for survivors, leaving survivors to feel invisible and betrayed by those that are closest to them.
So then what you are saying, that's powerful.
It is. It's
I
profound.
think a lot of people can relate to this where family members avoid being alone with a particular family member. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, I do. Um, you know, as I mentioned, families often have these unspoken rules and no one really talks about it, but everyone just seems to know them. They
Mm-hmm.
know not to be left alone with a particular male family member. They know, well, don't leave your kids around this person. Or, hey, we don't talk about that topic. That's hush hush. Keep that in the past, right? Or, hey, don't
Mm-hmm.
ask any questions about this. We're not talking about that. Let's leave that there, right? Those kinds of things. That's what I'm referring to when I talk about the unspoken rules.
Mm-hmm. And yet no one ever says anything out loud, as you just mentioned.
Right. And so what happens then, Wanda, is that the family learns to organize itself around the secret. Yeah. They learn to organize themselves around the secret rather than confront it. And in many families, discussing sexual assault just in general is taboo. And of course, that will lead to the patterns of silence that we're talking about. And then
Mm-hmm.
children grow up sensing the tension, sensing the unspoken rules, but rarely receive any type of honest explanation about what's happening. And this can create an atmosphere of confusion, fear, and mistrust that can last for years.
How about that?
Yeah.
So, Dr. B, one of the most complicated family secrets imaginable, I want to talk about.
Okay.
Sometimes a child is conceived
Mhm.
as a result of sexual assault.
Mm.
Families may choose never to discuss the circumstances surrounding that child's conception.
Mm-hmm.
The child may grow up sensing there is a secret but never understand what it is. So, how do families typically handle a secret
Mm-hmm.
like this? And what are the emotional consequences of keeping it hidden?
Well, I think this is probably one of the hardest and most complicated situations that a family can endure.
Mhm.
Usually, families keep this kind of secret because to them, they feel that they're protecting the survivor from having to relive the trauma. They're also trying to shield this child that was conceived from trauma, from stigma, right?
Mhm. Mm-hmm.
And they also may be striving to spare the family overall from the shame and judgment from others.
I see.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But what happens when such a big secret stays hidden like that? When the family members often end up shaping their lives around avoiding the truth instead of facing it. And for the survivor of assault, every
Mm-hmm.
milestone in that child's life, that child that has been conceived from that trauma, every
Mm-hmm.
milestone can bring up complicated feelings. They can still experience love for the child, absolutely. But
Mm-hmm.
love can also coexist with feelings of grief, anger, pain that's connected to the assault that happened.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to, impress upon listeners that these feelings are normal. But if they can't be talked about openly, they often become another layer of silence that gets passed down.
Mm-hmm. So that's heavy what you just described.
Mm-hmm.
That silence, man, it's just so heavy.
Yeah,
Um, and I imagine it shapes not just the survivors and the child, but the entire family dynamics.
absolutely. So even if the secret is never spoken aloud, it can affect relationships, right? In subtle ways. A
Mm-hmm.
mistrust, confusion, a sense of, hey, something is off, just in certain environments, you can just sense the tension. And, to the child that was conceived and born from that trauma, they then may start to internalize all of those feelings, right? They're seeing the family's reaction. They have become aware that there's just some cloud of secrecy around them, right? And
Mm-hmm.
they start internalizing feelings of unworthiness, anxiety, without really knowing the source. And for the survivor of the assault, the burden of carrying both trauma and secrecy, that's heavy, and it can also be very isolating.
Hmm. So, Dr. B, can you help me understand
Hmm.
regarding a time when you think revealing the secret becomes necessary?
Yeah, it's it's such a delicate decision, Wanda, honestly. Um, but sometimes sharing the truth, especially with care, support, professional guidance, even, it can really offer relief and help everyone start to heal.
Mm-hmm.
But I do want to caution that it has to be done thoughtfully, considering the emotional readiness of everyone involved. The most important thing is love, compassion, right? If you lead with love, you won't get it wrong. You got to have
Mm-hmm.
love for both the survivor and the child.
So, when we look at the next generation, they weren't told about the abuse directly. So, what is it that they're actually inheriting?
They may inherit things like fear, being hypervigilant, distrustful of others. Of course, the family tension, confusion around boundaries, and that can be inherited even if no one told them exactly what happened. Again, they're
Hmm.
inheriting the environment, the atmosphere, other people's feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
So, can children pick up on when something that just isn't right, even if no one says
That's
anything?
exactly what I'm saying. Exactly what I'm
Hmm.
saying. They notice,
Wow.
yeah, they
Yeah.
notice who isn't speaking to each other. They notice who isn't being spoken to at all. They notice who is not trustworthy. And they notice what topics are avoided or cause discomfort in the family. Even without explicit information, children start to absorb emotional cues and internalize the family's discomfort. In contexts where family loyalty is highly valued, it can even be harder for survivors to speak up or seek support because, again, family loyalty. what they say, the expression family over everything, right?
Yes, I've heard that many, many times in many scenarios.
Yeah.
Mm. Well, this is almost like inheriting a mystery.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean to make light of it,
Mm-hmm.
but that's just how I feel at the moment. So, do you find that these families ever try to solve these mysteries together, or do they tend to keep them buried?
Some Sometimes families do try to piece things together, especially when new information comes to the light or when someone decides to break the silence. But more often than not, sadly, the mystery remains unspoken, and the emotional consequences, of course, get continue to get passed down, like confusion, anxiety, misplaced guilt. It's only when someone is willing to confront the past that real
Hmm.
healing can begin.
I see. So, what typically happens when the truth finally comes out
Hmm.
in families? Can you share some examples?
Yeah, sometimes the truth comes to light when families' stories are kept secret for generations. Sometimes the truth comes to light when family stories that have been kept secret for generations are finally explored. And this can happen through discovering, I hate to say it, but yeah, death certificates,
Hmm.
addressing medical needs.
That's a top one.
Yeah,
Hmm.
DNA results, things that
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
just, occur, and from that situation, or it reveals the truth. The emotional impact then varies. Some people can feel a profound sense of relief from knowing, okay, now I know the truth about this situation. And for others, it can be deeply devastating. It's also common for families to struggle with trust and communication after these revelations have been revealed, right? But essentially,
Mm.
what I'm saying is that the truth always comes through to the light at some point. You just never know how and in what form.
I totally agree with that.
Hmm.
I totally agree. So, do many families continue to struggle with accepting the truth?
Of course, they do. And the truth, the reason it's so hard for people to accept truth is because not only does it challenge what they think about themselves, it challenges the family's identity, right? And so you have family members that may ask, well, why didn't anyone tell us? Who knew about this? And why was he protected? Why did it take so long for this truth to come out? Why has this been going on so long through so many generations? Why? Why?
Hmm.
I'm
Hmm.
grandchild, and you mean to tell me it happened in that generation and the generation before it, right? Start
Hmm.
asking those
Hmm.
questions.
That's crazy, but that's the reality. And I assume some outcomes can still carry anger,
Yeah.
and drive a wedge between family members, correct?
Oh, absolutely. And families often grieve both the abuse and they also grieve the years of silence. And when I say grieve, I mean there absolutely can be anger tied to that as to why.
Hmm.
Why was this kept silent? And why so
Hmm.
long? The emotional toll is profound. Family members might struggle with trust issues, feeling betrayed, guilt, anger. Again, these emotions, they all matter, but they
Hmm.
can have effects on your emotional and mental health, can lead to anxiety, depression,
Hmm.
and even the ability to form new relationships, healthy relationships, because you've learned to be distrustful.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And I always say this, healing is not a linear process. It's not a straight line, you know. It is a slow process, and it often requires open conversations, a supportive environment, and in many cases, professional help to start repairing some of these very deep wounds.
So then, can the revelation of a family secret feel like a second trauma? And how can families stop passing silence from one generation to the next?
It is absolutely a second trauma. Yes, the revelation of a family secret in itself is a second trauma. And
Mm-hmm.
to your next question, breaking generational patterns, I feel it requires replacing secrecy with truth and, most importantly, accountability.
So, on that note, please elaborate on healing the family
Healing.
legacy.
Legacy? Healing the family's legacy. Okay, well, I think healing, I know healing requires open dialogue and a willingness to confront painful realities. And we hope that that open dialogue can take place together where there's unity. Sometimes professional support obviously will assist in the process, like family therapy. To me, that's invaluable. Ultimately, facing the truth can be a turning point. It's like opening a door. It's, you know, opening a door to a new chapter that can hopefully lead to genuine connection and understanding. But that's only if families choose to work through it together. But I want to say this, Wanda, sometimes there isn't unity because there are
Mm-hmm.
some family members that may never accept the truth or be willing to speak on it. And in those instances, I want to say this, it's then up to the individual to achieve
Mm-hmm.
acceptance on their own. And
Mm-hmm.
they absolutely can do that for themselves. And they can be the one to still be able to break the cycle. I just want to make
Mm-hmm.
sure I emphasize that because we sometimes think it's going to be a kumbaya moment and we're all going to get together and we're going to heal together. There will be members that will flat out refuse to talk about
Mm-hmm.
it and will never get on program, so to speak. And I want to let your listeners know that they can still achieve their own healing. They can
Mm-hmm.
still achieve their own form of acceptance, even
Mm-hmm.
if others in the family don't agree or aren't aligned. That's okay. You can still
That's
do it.
okay.
You can do it and
That's
you can
okay.
heal alone.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
That's okay. And as you said, some will not
Yeah.
fall in line.
Yeah.
And there will be some that will be, and this goes back to what we said before in a previous episode.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes there's no reconciliation.
Yeah.
That's it.
Absolutely.
And some people will part ways permanently.
That's true.
And I've heard that with a couple of people that I have spoken to through the years.
Yes, ma'am.
So then my question to you is, although previous generations remain silent, having one person trying to break patterns of silence in the family can actually make a difference. And I know we sort of alluded to some of that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
you,
One
you can
person.
reiterate some points. Okay.
Sure. One
Okay.
person. One person. One
Okay.
person's truth. One
Mm-hmm.
person's truth telling can change the trajectory of an entire family. It can.
Okay. Okay. So, wow.
Mm-hmm.
This has been very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
The conversation has been very interesting. So, healing becomes part of the inheritance too, right?
I love that. Yeah, I like that you say that because we've been talking this whole time about inheriting trauma and pain and grief. But yes, healing can be inherited. Just as silence can be passed down, so can honesty, so can
Mm-hmm.
resilience and healing. And
Mm-hmm.
healing starts again when someone has the courage to name what happened.
Okay. So, perhaps the greatest tragedy isn't only what happens, it is how families carry the burden in silence. When the truth is finally spoken, it can be painful, but it can also become a moment family chooses a different legacy, would you say?
Yes, and keep in mind, Wanda, secrets often survive for generations because people believe that silence is protecting the family. And that's sort
Mm-hmm.
of a learned thing, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
here's the thing to note is that healing begins when we understand that truth, not the silence,
Mm-hmm.
is what creates the safety. That's what creates the healing. That is what creates the peace that we need and
Mm-hmm.
desire.
Okay. Well, that's great.
Yeah.
That's great because it gives a glimmer of hope for
Hope.
people that are listening.
Hope.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Hope.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. So today's conversation was difficult, but these family secrets are important and deserve to be heard with compassion and understanding. Family secrets can stay hidden for a long time, but talking about them openly can help. Dr. V, do you have any final thoughts on healing?
Well, I want to remind survivors that they are more than what happened to them. Their story does not end with trauma. And if they are overwhelmed, I want to encourage them to reach out and ask for help, whether that's a crisis line, local mental health services, consider going into therapy, talking with someone that can help in the healing process and also helping them to sustain change. And as
Mm-hmm.
I've said in previous episodes, healing becomes more powerful when it is shared.
Well, thank you, Dr. V, for providing thoughtful and informative content for our listeners.
I'm happy to do it. Thank you. It's my pleasure.
At its core, Heritage of Hush aims to build a community where healing is possible and every story matters. By sharing our truths, we encourage others to do the same, which leads to transformation. For more information on our project, please visit our website at azizipennandpod.com. Thank you for listening. Please share this podcast with someone who needs to hear it. New episodes released every Thursday at 7 a.m. Follow and subscribe on YouTube, Facebook, and Spotify. Until then, Heritage of Hush is where silence breaks, secrets speak, and healing begins. Take care and stay safe.